Marilyn, thank you for participating in this process. When and under what circumstances did you meet Julie?
Well, we both work at Macy's Union Square, although Julie is retired from there now. I think it was the strike of 2004 at Macy's. She was on the negotiating committee, but she'd also be out on the picket line, even though she didn't have to do double duty.
What experiences influenced you to become an activist?
My parents appreciated the New Deal and were anti-war and anti-racist. I participated in demonstrations, marching against the Vietnam War, other wars, the invasion of Iraq. I have been involved with the BDS movement, with Jewish Voice for Peace, and Middle East Children's Alliance.
You mentioned BDS. Could you say what that is?
Oh, that's the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement in support of the Palestinians.
Do you think that you and she have influenced each other politically or philosophically?
You know, I'm sure Julie has been more of an influence on me with her declaration of some hours of work, more hours of leisure. Leisure is not a dirty word. She taught me that. And at the very least, we should not have to apologize for having time off, that our jobs are not everything, and that we have other lives too.
I really think one day she'll even renounce war too.
Yes. I think we both agree that capitalism is not a law of nature. Julie and I share the belief that we're all responsible for each other because we all inherently belong to the same global community, both locally and globally. She's taken the time to listen to me when I've discussed my issues. She's given me unconditional support, and I've been moved by her understanding. No doubt her compassion has been a motivating force for her to do good. She's been active for over 3 decades in union and social justice groups, mostly to bring about fair conditions for workers in San Francisco and the Bay Area. But she's even encouraged protections of overseas garment workers from sweatshop conditions. This award should be called Labor of Love, Woman of the Year. Julie's lovable and we love her. I remember her facing an executive exiting the store and her raising her voice, adding, "In spite of the scare tactics and false rumors being spread by management." Julie has this calm demeanor which sort of belies her fighting spirit, which does come out.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about Julie or any personal message for her?
Working with Julie more than anyone else has definitely made me more committed to the value of and power of the collective. I also agree with Julie and other members of the Living Wage Coalition that unions have an opportunity as collectives to go beyond a single cause and expand their voice toward a broader range of social issues, such as immigration, racism, anti-war, climate change. I think this can actually increase solidarity and civic engagement among the members.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
When and under what circumstances did you first meet her?
Well, we go back about 40 years. I think her local was still Local 1100.
Yeah.
In any case, it was a member of the San Francisco Organizing Project, which was a federation of 21 religious congregations, 11 union locals, including your own,
Yeah.
and the Labor Council.
Right.
And that federation was developed by Organized Training Center, which I direct. And it was a multi-issue, essentially religion-labor alliance in San Francisco. As a delegate from her local to the organization, Julie became active in it, and we got to know each other.
You have a long, long history of activism, and a very effective activism in my mind and in the minds of many people. What do you think influenced you to become the activist that you are?
Well, being engaged with the world is something that was part of my mother's milk. So on a number of occasions, my parents would take me to picket lines or union activities. And then in civics, in junior high, I remember calling strikebreakers scabs, and my homeroom teacher said I was a communist. So that was in the heart of the McCarthy era.
Yeah.
And then later, I was at the University of California. I was active in it was really the ending days of the McCarthy era. We were the silent generation. And I was the chairman of a campus political party there called Slate, which was one of the first Northern student movement voices. I was on the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee staff for 4 years, including summer of '63. I was in Mississippi. Then I went on to direct the Saul Alinsky project in Kansas City, Missouri. Came back here. I was the lead organizer for the Mission Coalition. We defeated urban renewal, one of the few neighborhoods in the country to do that. So, and then I started Organized Training Center in 1972. So this has been my life, this commitment to social and economic justice and to the participation of everyday people in determining the conditions of their lives. She has a deep commitment to people. She's a passionate person about everyday people having the right to a decent income, to decent living conditions, to having their voices heard, whether it's in the community or at the workplace. This has been what I think has motivated her for all the years I've known her. But one of the big crisis contract years with Macy's, I was deeply involved with that local. And so we worked very closely together. And she was always a person you could count on, always with good spirit, a sense of solidarity with everybody else. I mean, you couldn't ask for more.
She speaks of you as a mentor who influenced her life very much. Can you think of any way that she influenced you?
I think mostly this spirit that she brings to everything she does. And I have a tendency toward pessimism. I think she was a very good influence in that regard. And even after we worked closely together in a phone conversation, if I needed a boost, Julie was there to provide it. The time that is most memorable is that early 80s contract negotiation with Macy's. She was on the negotiating committee. Whenever spirits would waver, she would be there to bolster people. When people were ready to settle, she would encourage, no, let's stay, we're going to get more. She could get people to see that if they remained united and stuck by their guns, they could be better. They could do better at the table. She also knew when to compromise, but she wasn't willing to compromise with herself, which is what a lot of people in negotiating committees tend to do. I'm proud to have been her friend all these years. I really am. She's a salt of the earth person.
Thanks very much, Mike. You're a hero to many people.
So my name is David Frias. I'm the co-director with Carl Kramer of the San Francisco Living Wage Coalition. When and under what circumstances did you meet Rodger?
Well, I met Rodger when I first started working at City College back in 1979, and I immediately went into the union office and joined the union. And shortly after that, I met Rodger Scott. I'm originally from Sacramento, California, and I transferred from Sacramento City College to San Francisco State College in 1967. I participated in the student strikes there for ethnic studies programs, and there was a lot of anti-war activity that went on, and eventually I became a war resistor, and I refused to show up for my draft notices, and finally I left the country, and I wound up in France, where the French Sûreté Nationale police arrested me, and they showed me a dossier of my anti-war activities that had been handed to them by the American embassy. And they showed me the arrest warrant, and then they said if I wanted political asylum, they were granting it now to American war resistors. In 1966, under President de Gaulle, France had pulled out of NATO. And so shortly after that, a GI from Germany drove a tank across the border at Strasbourg. And so the border guards there called General de Gaulle in the middle of the night and said, "What do we do?" And he said, "Well, keep the GI and give the Americans back their tank." And so that was the beginning of a fairly large colony of draft resistors and military war resistors that wound up in France. So I stayed there for almost 9 years. And there was a lawyer here in Berkeley who took on my case pro bono, and eventually I won. And while I was in France, I should add, I got very active in the teachers union there, and was an organizer with the CGT. And that was a real eye-opening experience for me, because French trade union organizing is a bit different from organizing here. They're pretty aggressive in their ability to win contracts and change law.
I met Rodger when I was a counselor at the San Francisco Community College District in Chinatown. And I also become quite active because I started a group called Asian Coalition. It was made up of mainly Chinese teachers, and we're fighting for our employment equity rights, and we were fighting for affirmative action for teachers. Rodger and the late Ray Barat were one of the few white teachers who supported us, and we formed a strong collegiate friendship and also a strong trust. I came to this country from Hong Kong in 1967, and I didn't know very much about the Chinese community. So when I was in college, I started volunteering in Chinatown. I helped immigrants to get jobs into schools and assisted them at hospital by translating for them, and different kind of things. They have serious problems, not just with unemployment, but also underemployment. So after I graduated from college, I went back to Chinatown, and I worked for a year at an organization called Chinese for Affirmative Action. And there I learned a lot about civil rights advocacy. And after I graduated from Stanford with an MA degree program, I wanted to go back to Chinatown to work. So I waited my time until a position opened up, and applied to become a counselor. And that was how I become active. And then through Rodger, I learned a lot about teachers' issues. So in my own ways, I also worked for the Chinese teachers. We were able to do a lot of things together.
Jim, do you think you and Rodger have influenced each other politically or philosophically?
Well, I've tried. I have to admit that when it comes to political and philosophical discussions with Dr. Scott, I should do more listening than lecturing. He likes to quote what he calls the Texan's prayer: "God help me find the truth and protect me from those who have found it." I have definitely been influenced by Dr. Scott's incredible perseverance and patience in the struggles that he's been involved in, starting with his whole history of war resistance that goes back to his days in the Peace Corps, when he was demonstrating at the U.S. Embassy in Bogota, and when he went to Japan and he wound up on the Quaker peace sailing yacht, the Phoenix. I mean, that ship was famous for getting involved in anti-nuclear activities in the Pacific Ocean back in the late 50s and early 60s, and then later in the late 60s sailed through the U.S. Naval Armada off the coast of Vietnam to deliver medical supplies to victims of the U.S. bombing there, which to me, these were incredibly impressive things that he was either involved in or associated with. So yeah, he's influenced me a great deal. Rodger's always on the side of people who are in need of justice. And sometimes I remember him representing people at the college, teachers usually, who had legitimate grievances, but may have been on the exact opposite side of the political spectrum from him. There was one case, I think it was the Giannopoulos case, where there was a welding instructor who had asbestosis. And so he had reached a settlement with the district on the classes that he would be teaching, and then the administration reneged on it. By that time, Rodger had done a paralegal course at City College, and he got involved with our labor lawyer, Bob Bezimick. And it took them 12 years, but they finally won an incredible case for Giannopoulos. Giannopoulos was awarded back pay amounting to, I don't know, $350,000 plus his pension. He also won another case, I think it was called the Servisi case, where he took that to court along with our attorney, Bob Bezimick, and they won recognition for the fact that part-time hourly instructors are basically laid off between each semester. And so they should be allowed to apply for unemployment benefits. And they won that case. And it resulted in basically millions of dollars being collected in unemployment benefits by part-time instructors. He would then represent teachers individually. And when their cases were refused by EDD, he would go back with them and appeal and win every time.
Julie, do you think you and Rodger have influenced each other politically or philosophically?
I think very, very much. When I ran for the community college board, Rodger was one of the first person I contacted and received his blessing and support. After I become elected on the college board, I was also elected as president. And Rodger was a relentless and formidable advocate for teachers. He was now on the opposite side of me. If Rodger is there, we always call him first because he would set the tone. I think that I also influenced Rodger in my own ways. I drafted him into an organization called Rape of Nanjing Redress Coalition, which we started together in 1998. Now, the purpose of the organization is to educate the community about atrocities committed by the Japanese Imperial Army and advocate for the victims to get an apology and compensation for this suffering. He also helped us build the San Francisco Comfort Women Memorial and spoke at school districts to urge them to adopt the Comfort Woman curriculum. Rodger also is helping me right now to promote peace between the United States and China. We live in a very unjust world in many regards, and that in itself is a great motivation for him to work for the underdog. But that's not enough. I think to be a fighter, you have to be equipped not just with a fire in the belly, but the skills to go with it. Rodger has a gift of speech and writing and a formidable intellect.
I can't think of anyone that I know who would be more deserving of this award than Dr. Scott. He has done so much for the labor movement, and he's been working on the, I forget the names, the Mario Woods Coalition and the Moms group that is fighting all of the police violence and the murders of young people of color. And, you know, Rodger's been out there getting arrested all over the place. I mean, he was arrested and imprisoned in Japan for his anti-war protests there. And he went on a hunger strike, and finally they deported him in 1969, I think. But he's been arrested here in San Francisco in demonstrations for good faith bargaining. And he's been arrested in Sacramento, protesting for better funding for education.
He truly believes in what he's doing. I love his book, that he wrote on Grover Lewis. It really tells more about Rodger and the goodness and the wisdom and the kindness that he sees in other people is what he has in him. So I'm really proud that I can be a part of this event to celebrate him being honored. He's not an easy person to deal with in some ways, but when he sets his heart into it, when it's a just cause, he'll do it. He'll do it in whatever way that needs to be done, even though it takes 10 years or even 12 years or 20 years, he'll do it.
Bertolt Brecht said that there are those who struggle for a day and they are good. And there are those who struggle for a week and they are better. And there are those who struggle for a year and they are better still. And then there are those who struggle for a lifetime and they are the indispensable ones. And in my estimation, that's Dr. Rodger Scott.